This is the bullshit alert episode. Let's start with Michael Phelps talking about how he never missed a day of training.
I wanted to do something that nobody had ever done before. And that started with a dream and a goal. I wanted to be the greatest of all time. I went 5 straight years without missing a single day of workout, 365 days a year. Every single day I was in the water. And in the sport of swimming, when you miss one day, it takes you 2 days to get back. So I was already I was continuing to build on that throughout that time. And you know, that was kind of just how I was. There are days you're not gonna wanna do it, sure. And everybody has those days. But it's what you do on those days that help you move forward.
Hey, that's a lot of BS there. And it's BS that pisses me off. It's not harmless. The first thing I'm going to call Michael Phelps out on is that there's no way he did not miss a single day of training. This video, he says 5 years. There's another video on Instagram where he says he didn't miss a day in 7 years. And on that video, he details how he did 4 workouts every single day, 365 days a year for 7 years. Complete fabrication. And it's a harmful one because there's a lot of impressionable people watching, especially young athletes, but all of us who are getting this message embedded into our consciousness that this is a great champion and this is how the path to success comes forth. And the hidden message that's not really detailed is that you have no freaking chance to be that good because you're too much of a wuss to not miss a single day and do 4 workouts a day for 7 years. So back to the specifics where I can call fabrication here. Serious swimmers do train at a tremendous volume, rivaling that of any other athletes in the world. I would say that the Tour de France cyclists and the Ironman level triathlete are another 2 categories where the athletes are out there for multiple hours routinely every single day. So a serious Olympic level swimmer will generally engage in what's called doubles. That means 2 workouts a day, and they'll do that for many days a week because there's no impact load that is preventing them from spending hours and hours, as there might be for even the greatest marathon runners. Will put in a maximum of 130, 140 miles a week, which takes, let's say, a couple hours a day maximum, or 15 or 20 hours a week total if you count gym time. So a top swimmer will indeed do doubles, spending 4 or 5 hours a day total in the pool, maybe even more when you count a super long workout. But if you're someone who's saying that you did 4 workouts a day, 365 days a year for 7 years, it's a massive embellishment. And I will bet, if I had an Olympic gold medal, I would bet that this is a stretch. And it seems like a pattern that certain elite athletes need to tell tall tales, I guess, to grow their mystique and to further intimidate the competition. It reminds me of Kobe Bryant describing how he woke up at 4 a.m. to train because, hey, if the competition's waking up at 6 a.m. to train, then he'll get a big edge on those people. Let's hear from Kobe talk some more BS in the same realm as Michael Phelps.
You're working out. So talk about that.
Okay, so if your job is to try to be the best basketball player you can be, right? To do that, you have to practice, you have to train, right? You want to train as much as you can, as often as you can. So if you get up at 10 in the morning, train at 11, right? 12, say 12, train at 12, train for 2 hours, 12 to 2. You have to let your body recover. So you eat, recover, whatever. You get back out, you train, start training again at 6. Train from 6 to 8, right? And now you go home, you shower, you eat dinner, you go to bed, you wake up, you do it again, right? Those are 2 sessions, right? Now imagine you wake up at 3, you train at 4. You go 4 to 6, come home, breakfast, relax, blah, blah, blah. Now you're back at it again, 9 to 11, right? You relax, and now all of a sudden you're back at it again, 2 to 4, and now you're back at it again, 7 to 9. Look how much more training I have done by simply starting at 4, right? And so now you do that, and as the years go on, the separation that you have with your competitors and your peers just grows larger and larger and larger and larger and larger. And by year 5 or 6, doesn't matter what kind of work they do in the summer, they're never going to catch up because they're 5 years behind, right? So it makes sense to get up and start your day early because you can get more work in.
Simple math, people. It makes sense. What a bunch of nonsense. And again, a really harmful message to convey to the impressionable young athletes. There was a clip of kids in this video, and all of them had headphones on and seemed like they were already tuned out. They weren't looking at Kobe, they were looking down at their device or something, which is pretty hilarious. But back to Michael Phelps's contention that he trained every day, 4 times a day. Maybe we should ask Katie Ledecky, who seemingly was more honest about her training pattern. She's the greatest endurance swimmer of all time, completely dominant in the female long distance swimming events. So 800, 1500 being her specialty. And also she's winning golds down to 400 meters. So incredibly versatile, has gone through multiple Olympic cycles at the very top. And she says, quote, in a recent interview in Eating Well magazine, I train about 25 to 30 hours a week, about 20 hours in the pool and another 5 to 10 in the gym. Now, since she's an endurance specialist going up to 1500 meters where the race lasts for 15 plus minutes, she would arguably be putting in more training volume than someone like Michael Phelps, who specializes in the sprint distance events. His events range from 48 seconds to 4 minutes in the IM. He was pretty versatile because 4 minutes is out there more in the endurance category. But the longest event he ever swam was 4 minutes and change, not 15 minutes. So if Katie Ledecky's training 25 to 30 hours a week, there's no way a sprinter is training for that duration of time and not missing a day. There's all kinds of reasons why you would miss a day of training. And if you had this dogged mentality to not miss a day of training, like Kobe expresses and like Michael Phelps expresses, that can easily lead to your downfall. And I'm going to argue that these athletes excelled due to that amazing competitive mentality, competitive intensity, but perhaps in spite of an overly obsessive, dogged approach to training, despite notwithstanding that they're lying and embellishing, that overly obsessive approach to go over the top, most likely to feed their ego or to intimidate the competition. Phelps, I mean, this is the same guy who told the British press years ago what he ate in a day. And he described it, and it was all printed in a major feature story that was picked up in many news outlets. I remember the USA Today newspaper cover story. For breakfast, I have 3 fried egg sandwiches, 3 chocolate chip pancakes. He makes sandwiches that use up the entire loaf of bread. He has a pound of pasta for lunch. He has another pound of pasta for dinner. And the writer actually took the time to calculate the caloric content of everything that Phelps rattled off for his daily calorie consumption, and the headline story became Michael Phelps eats 12,000 calories a day, and it became an international sensation that was bantered about with awe and fascination, even though it was extremely off-base, ridiculous, and embellished. Even Phelps had to deal with some fallout in the years following. And so in his autobiography titled No Limits, he admitted that the account and the calorie total was inaccurate. And he wrote a correction in his book to say that it was more like 8 to 10,000 calories per day. Now, Phelps is not an expert on human calorie consumption, but even this is completely off base and again, super irresponsible for a public figure to be spouting things like the caloric intake when it was wrong and not useful and potentially counterproductive to those listening and following. There's great research from the bodybuilding community where these guys are so dedicated to extreme training methods to grow their muscles as big as possible, which requires maximum training load as well as maximum caloric intake. And interestingly, amongst bodybuilders, do you know what the limiting factor is for maximum muscle growth and maximum muscles popping out of their body? It's not the amount of training volume. It's not the number of hours available in the day to train. Sorry, Kobe, waking up at 4 a.m. so you can train more. It's actually their ability to process calories without blowing out their digestive system. The human is only capable of ingesting a certain caloric limit each day. Ronnie Coleman, one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time, amazing giant muscle physique, and he had a good long career. He was known to eat. He was studied, and this is on actual research you can find on PubMed. He consumed around 6,000 calories per day. eating 6 small meals throughout the day in order to successfully ingest and process all those calories. And that was about his upper limit. Today, with the great Norwegian triathletes, Blumenfeld and Iten, their coach Olaf Alexander Boo has been on some podcasts talking about their advanced training methods where they're highly quantifying everything, including their caloric intake and their ability to process maximum calories on board while training so that they can go so fast. In other words, they're up there in the sugar burning heart rate zones when they're racing Ironmans at sub 8 hour pace. And so they need a lot of calories ingested because they're burning them at such a high rate, unlike the kind of traditional approach to endurance training where we've tried to become good at burning stored body fat so we can last all day without falling apart and passing out. Now it seems like the extreme endurance athletes of the planet who are performing at the highest levels are able to ingest a substantial amount of calories while training, while exercising, as well as throughout the day, so they can handle 8 hour training days, as you can see on these YouTube feature videos of Christian Blumenfeld, a day of training, or Jan Frodeno had a day of training where he did like 5 workouts, including running to the track twice and doing track workouts and swimming and biking. Crazy, beyond my comprehension of what we were able to do in a day. But the limiting factor is caloric intake, not hours of training. So when Phelps brazenly pops off saying that he was eating 8 to 10,000 calories a day, he is adding poorly and dispensing complete nonsense. Here's an idea. Why not just tell the truth and publish your actual training logs from your days as an Olympic performer, and even perhaps your dietary intake for the benefit of all athletes, coaches, and people who want to analyze what the best are doing? Eliud Kipchoge, the great marathoner from Kenya, did just that, where he published detailed accounts of his training patterns. And then the exercise physiologists and the coaches had a field day dissecting it and publishing articles and information about what level of what time he's spending in each of the training zones. It was an amazing insight that we detailed extensively in the book Born to Walk, where Kipchoge spends around 83% of his weekly training volume in zone 1, not zone 2, which is so highly touted as the aerobic training zone, but zone 1. So most of his training comes at a comfortable pace. And that is a really great takeaway insight for all of us when we're trying to figure out, especially how to train for endurance sports. Look to the greatest of all time, undisputed, the greatest marathon runner of all time, spending most of his time at a pace which equates to a medium or brisk walk for most marathon runners, even accomplished marathon runners. Back to more of this calorie discussion, because I think it's super important to understand the research from Dr. Herman Ponzer, my former podcast guest and one of the world's leading experts on caloric expenditure amongst humans and other primates. It suggests that the maximum sustainable energy expenditure for the human is around 2.5 times basal metabolic rate. And this is based on data from Tour de France, the amazing Race Across America bike ride, the nonstop Race Across America that I was fortunate enough to be a crew member for one time for Johnny G, who crossed the country on his bicycle in 11 days. The record is 8 days. And these guys are pedaling on their bicycle for up to 22 hours per day with a 2-hour rest period. They're consuming 4,000 to 6,000 calories a day. And I guarantee you there is no athlete burning more fuel than a Race Across America cyclist. And one of the big limiting factors to Johnny's performance when I was right there in his crew was his ability and his desire to consume a sufficient amount of calories to fuel performance for going around the clock into the night and taking only brief rest periods until getting back out on the bike and pedaling. Pretty soon he just couldn't stomach any more food. He started to get sick of the special high-performance nutritional shakes that we were handing him that were, contemplated to give him the best and easiest fuel to digest. In one of his Race Across America attempts, he had too much sugar in his mouth for too long a duration because he kept sipping the drink and the fuel that he was consuming. And so he dissolved a tooth during the bike race, leading to some dental pain and other complications. So Tour de France, they've shown that these guys are consuming up to 8 or 9,000 calories per day, but only for a few weeks of the event. So they are basically getting off that bike and chowing down as much as possible until the next day's stage start. And right up there on par with the Race Across America are the extreme expeditions, like Expedition to the Arctic, and their caloric intake can rise really high for a very short time. So we're talking about 8 or 9 or perhaps 10,000 calories in a day for a handful of time. So if Phelps is saying that he's consuming 8 to 10,000 calories a day and training every day for 7 years, we have a complete distortion of what was really going on. Not to criticize him, because obviously he didn't know how many calories he was burning, so he shouldn't have said anything. And the writer on the USA Today might have done his journalistic integrity and realized that maybe this athlete was fabricating. But there's a great link that has all this research and showing the upper limit calories, which, when I said 2.5 times basal metabolic rate, so for an athlete training over the long term, it's around 4,000 to 6,000 calories per day would be the maximum sustainable ability to consume that much fuel and train at the highest level. And so that's basically what we're seeing with the bodybuilders, like the Ronnie Coleman story, and with the Norwegian triathletes or the Tour de France riders. Now, here's another important point for reflection when we hear from Michael Phelps, and that is that this type of obsessive approach to training is absolutely not necessary for success. And it comes with a high risk of fallout in the area of mental health. This type of obsessive mindset and refusal to miss a single day, and forming the belief system that if you miss a day in the water, it takes 2 days to get back to where you were. This is complete garbage and nonsense, and it's been proven conclusively by exercise physiology, the great work of Dr. David Costill at Ball State University Human Performance Lab, world renowned, and his work was on swimmers of all people that Phelps should be familiar with. And it goes back to the 70s, before Phelps was even born or started his career. The Costill research revolutionized old school endurance training, where it was thought that more was better. And then he did some amazing research on tapering. We've detailed this in a few of our books because it's just such a mind blown, that if you reduce your training volume by 50% for 7 weeks, you know what the result is? Do you get out of shape? No, you actually achieve peak performance. So this group of swimmers that tapered, again, this is back in the 70s, that blew the minds of coaches and exercise physiologists everywhere. A massive, massive taper. Imagine cutting every single workout you do in half for almost 2 months, and then you do a performance test at the end to compare to the performance test you did before you started the taper, and more swimmers improve their times or maintain their times versus regressing. Let's hear more blather from Phelps with this
my life,
beautiful,
my career
dramatic,
was not a smooth, easy road. I had a lot of ups
the
and downs.
motivational
I
video.
went through a lot of tough times. After 2012, I fell into a major state of depression. That was probably the hardest fall for me. I didn't want to be in the sport anymore. I didn't want to be alive anymore. I just never forget just being in my bedroom at home and literally sitting in there for 3 to 5 days and just not wanting to be alive. I've never been somebody who's given up, and I didn't want to give up in that moment. So for me, I thought there was a different road that I could go down. I went 5 or 6 straight years without missing a single day. Doesn't matter a holiday, a birthday, if I'm sick, this or that, it doesn't matter. I wanted to make that sacrifice to do something nobody else has ever done. So for me to go 5 or 6 straight years, that meant I had 52 extra days a year. But also in the sport of swimming, if you take 1 day off, it takes you 2 days to get back to where you were. As where I'm getting 6 years straight. So I'm getting that much more ahead of them. I'm getting that much more work. I'm in that much better shape. I wasn't racing anybody else. I was racing myself. I didn't care what anybody else did. If I went the time that I had on my goal sheet, I knew there was not another soul on that planet that could have done the times that I had written down. There were days where I didn't want to get out of bed. There were days where I'm sore, I can't move, I don't want to swim, I'm tired, I don't feel well, this, that, the other. I'm sure we all have days like that. If you really want something and if you care about something that much, it doesn't matter if you're not super successful the first time. Because if it's something that you're truly passionate about, you're going to get up and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. It doesn't matter how hard it is to get there. If you really want something, there shouldn't be a damn thing in this world that should stand in front of you and accomplishing that goal. And that's the bottom line. Because our mind, if we put our mind to something, we can accomplish truly everything.
All right. Yes, good job on the video. Great editing, great music. I too am inspired by someone who has tremendous passion for his goals. And I relate tremendously because I've had a long journey of high level and high intensity, high competitive intensity pursuing my athletic goals and dreams. But do you see how they are trying to program our minds to think that this is the path to success? And boy, it's pretty polished and measured. I'm sure Phelps had a great speech writer or presentation helper to spew out these perfect anecdotes to capture the fascination and the appreciation of the crowd. But again, I really want to look at the dark side here and peel off the blather and the dramatic classical music. Phelps, of all people, is a great subject for this because he's been really honest and open and vulnerable with his mental health struggles. He was the featured athlete in the great documentary titled Weight of Gold that profiled many of our favorite top Olympic athletes and the tremendous struggles that they endured behind the scenes. And a lot of these struggles are due to the amazing amount of pressure and attention that we heap upon them as athletic celebrities and the internal drive that gets out of hand and also fueled and supported by their circle around them, by the coaches and the hangers-on and the sponsors and all the people that are looking to get something from the success that the athlete has. Here's a quote from a New York Times article about Phelps. Toward the end of his swimming career, Phelps began talking about the anxiety and depression he experienced as he became the most decorated Olympian of all time, while the gymnast Simone Biles and tennis player Naomi Osaka have both taken time off from their sports to focus on their well-being. Caleb Dressel, another compatriot of Phelps and maybe like the next most amazing long-term Olympian swimmer besides Phelps. I think he has like 9 gold medals or something. Here's the quote from the article. Caleb Dressel, after winning 5 gold medals at the Tokyo Olympics, Caleb Dressel publicly discussed struggling with mental health, including depression and panic attacks. He took an 8-month break from swimming to address these issues. Dressel has also spoken about the feeling like the imposter syndrome and the immense pressure leading up to and after the Olympics, which contributed to his mental health struggles. So I'm really, I give these athletes a tremendous amount of credit for coming forth and telling their entire story rather than being just BS posers on the cover of the cereal box, showing off their gold medals, but not talking about their health struggles. Actually, Phelps and others, I don't think, had a choice. That little clip that you saw in the motivational video was him getting booked in the police station for his high-profile DUI and then a stint in rehab that he had to endure in the middle of his career. So I definitely realized that he missed some training days there. But anyway, I want to give a shout out to the young athletes watching this stuff and hopefully watching this presentation. Please don't listen to this bullshit and don't buy into it, lock, stock, and barrel. And parents also, especially, be on the alert for anyone walking around spouting this 10,000 hour rule bullshit philosophy as applied to young athletes. And if you're not familiar with the 10,000 hour rule, this is a principle advanced by the scientist K. Anders Ericsson, and it was highlighted prominently in a book by Malcolm Gladwell that this 10,000 hour approach was the key to success in high performance activities. His research, Ericsson's research, was on violin players that reached the highest virtuoso mastery level. And it turns out that they had an average of 10,000 hours of practice before they reached the mastery level. But even Ericsson refuted the commentary, the guy who came up with the 10,000 hour rule did not like how Malcolm Gladwell portrayed it in the book. And now there's been a tremendous backlash against this rule, which I should explain it in general. It's the idea that you need to grind out 10,000 hours worth of practice to achieve mastery in something really competitive, like being a master violinist or being an Olympic athlete. And it just doesn't hold to actual scientific research. David Epstein, in his great book, The Sports Gene, he's a former podcast guest. You can go listen to that show. But he has a great chapter that I especially enjoyed called The Tale of Two High Jumpers in his book, The Sports Gene. And he talks about compare and contrast to two of the world's top high jumpers. One of them was Donald Thomas from the Bahamas, and the other one was Stefan Holm of Sweden. And Holm was captivated by the event when he was a young boy. And so he started high jumping like crazy, like at the age of 5 or something. And he ended up winning the Olympic gold medal in Athens in 2004. He has the record for the highest height jumped over his head. So he stands around 5'10", 5'11", and he's jumped up there at 7'10", 7'11". So 2 feet over his head. Of course, it doesn't count for any official record, but it is a pretty awesome record. One of the greatest high jump achievements of all time. This Donald Thomas character was goofing around, talking trash with some basketball players at a junior college outside of Chicago. He was talking with some track and field athletes. He was a basketball player, and they were talking about the high jump, this event that he'd never heard of. And he says, "Oh, I bet you I could do pretty well at that." And they're like, "Oh, you don't realize how hard it is." They took him out to the track, his first time he'd ever seen a crossbar and a pit. In basketball high tops, as the legend goes, he cleared 7 feet in the high jump. His first time ever. The track guys marched him straight over to the track coach and said, "This basketball dude just jumped 7 feet in high tops." They got him into the sport of track. Less than 1 year later, he was the world champion in the high jump in Osaka at the World Track and Field Championships. So the complete refutation of the 10,000 hour rule, that this guy can come out of nowhere and compete head to head with Stefan Holm, who has indeed put in those 10,000 hours. So this is a vote for genetic competency, athletic gifts, people being naturals and sitting down at the piano for the first time and being able to write a high-level concerto like Mozart did when he was 9 years old or whatever, and all the negative aspects of the 10,000 hour rule, thinking that some reliable path to mastery lies in putting in a massive, massive amount of hours. When you think about what 10,000 hours is, if we work 40 hours a week for 50 weeks a year at a job, that's 2,000 hours, right? So that would be 5 years of 40 hours per week full-time grind at some sport or some endeavor, and then expecting to achieve mastery at the end. In fact, if it's just not in the cards for you, even that number of hours might not bring home the gold medal at the end. There was a great story from a golf journalist up in Portland, Oregon, who decided to put the 10,000 hour rule to test in real life. So he was a decent golfer. I believe he was like an 80s shooter or a low 90s, someone who enjoyed golf and wasn't that great, but certainly wasn't terrible. He decided to quit his job and go on a quest and chronicle the whole thing in his journalistic style to see if he could be a professional level player after putting in 10,000 hours of golf practice. And so he logged his hours and wrote a blog and chronicled his participation, his improved scores over time. And he practiced and practiced and practiced. Imagine practicing golf or playing golf for 10,000 hours, how many rounds that is, and how many buckets of balls for how many years. And guess what? He only made it to around 6,000 hours, and then he crapped out. And he got to be pretty good, obviously much better than his starting point. He was now shooting in the 70s, whatever, the mid 70s or the high 70s on an average public golf course in Portland, Oregon, nowhere near professional competitor level, because it just wasn't in the cards for him, despite all that practice. And as many golf experts contend, and experts in other sports too, an extreme amount of practice can actually be counterproductive. Now, in swimming, you have less risk of getting slower and slower as a swimmer because the injury risk is lower, and generally the more hours you put in, you're going to get better and better up to a certain point. And that's why the great swimmers in collegiate level or Olympic level are training really hard for many hours a day. However, for every Michael Phelps, this is literally true, there are dozens of dudes who flamed out and never made it all the way to the top due to burnout, injuries, illness, performance regression, inability to absorb and benefit from the extreme level of training heaped upon them by modern coaching and team dynamics and all the things that we see. I've associated with so many young runners who have come after me. Remember, I was a burnt out, frequently injured, frequently ill collegiate runner where my career just went up in flames. I was actually sick or injured 5 seasons in a row at UC Santa Barbara. I never was able to run in an official track meet despite trying for 3 seasons. And in cross country, I did okay my first season coming out of high school where I was not trained by the program at the extreme level. And then I had pneumonia, mono, stress fracture, shin splints, knee problems, and kept bombing out early into the season, well below my potential, before I finally quit and went off on my own to pursue the amazing new sport of triathlon and able to train in my own cycles, in my own patterns, and be more sensible and reasonable rather than adhering to the template and the flawed competitive intensity dynamic that is often seen in endurance sports where the athletes are pushing each other day after day after training and training to the extent that we exhaust ourselves and leave our best performances on the race course. Same with Kobe Bryant and basketball players. Yes, if you want to get better and you want to play significantly, even at the high school level, the level of competition is so high. And at a high school where there's 1,000, 2,000, or 3,000 students, remember there's only 15 kids on the basketball team. So you're definitely going to have to put in tons of work. Just like Kobe, that was the title of his documentary, Putting in Work. And that's great. But at a certain point, if you're waking up at 4 a.m. and working out till 6, and then going again at 9 to 11, and then going again at 3 to 5, you are most likely going to burn out and develop flawed mental perspective and philosophical perspective about your sport. So to the young kids, take all this stuff with a grain of salt or stick your tongue out directly and say, what a bunch of nonsense. I would love that. Train sensibly, get plenty of rest, find other hobbies to diversify your approach to life rather than become obsessed with your performance in a narrow level of activity. Even if you are going to reach to the highest level, the healthiest, most well-adjusted athletes are those that have a healthy, happy, balanced lifestyle. Are you familiar with the author Dr. Jim Lohr? He's written books about mental training and mental techniques for athletic peak performance for many years. Great stuff, one of the world's leading experts. And he contends that the athlete with the ideal competitive mentality that he's seen is Steph Curry, Golden State Warriors. One of the greatest basketball players of all time, greatest shooter of all time, three-point shooter overall, just an amazing wizard on the basketball court with a wonderful career, still going strong for Golden State. Guess what he does in the off season? Yeah, he likes to play a little golf, and he's so freaking good at golf that it's absolutely mind-blowing that this is his hobby. He's actually played on a secondary level professional tour event and competed notably with professional golfers. And in the celebrity golf event that they have every year up in Lake Tahoe, he's a former winner. You can see him on YouTube hitting a hole-in-one at the Tahoe Celebrity Golf Tournament. So this is a guy who's got golf in the background from, of course, his very, very intense basketball career, but it helps serve as a wonderful balance, especially in the summertime when he needs to get away from the court and away from all that practicing and away from all that dribbling and start focusing on making putts. And yes, there's athletic competency that carries over from different sports. We hear so much criticism and commentary about the early specialization in youth sports and how it leads to greater injury rates, greater rate of burnout, even strains the family, because if you want to be a good volleyball player, you got to join the club team and pay thousands of dollars and travel all over the place and take up all these weekends playing and playing and playing just for the odd chance that you might have an opportunity to play in college. And by that time, many of the athletes are burnt out anyway. So let's think about Steph Curry leaving the court and going and teeing up the golf ball instead of Kobe Bryant telling us to work out at 4 a.m., again at 9 a.m., and again at 3 p.m. Thank you so much for listening, watching, and sorry to trash on you, top athletes. I love you guys. I love what you've performed. But as a public figure, we have a deep, deep responsibility to first be very, very accurate and precise with the truth about how we train and eat and sleep and live and whatever else we're asking you about. And secondly, to keep that ego in check and dispense advice that might be really sensible for everyone, especially with an eye toward mental health. Thank you, Michael Phelps, for being the centerpiece of that documentary, Weight of Gold. But I don't see how this commentary that we watched on video goes hand in hand with that at all. It's actually a disgrace. So put it all in perspective, everybody. Thanks for listening, watching. I'd love to know your comments and feedback on the show because it's a pretty controversial topic, but I'm glad to hit hard when something really hits me hard.